I've had the chance to drive a lot of electric vehicles over the years, but I hadn't had a chance to drive a Tesla properly and evaluate it. But now that I've spent a week with the Tesla Model 3, the new one, the Highland, in dual motor long range guys, I think I've seen the light. And to me, this is the best electric vehicle that I've ever driven. It's not perfect. There are some things that I would change about it or do differently, but it's a far better car than any of its established competitors, and it's clear that the people who make it are really smart, and they are aware of the things that OEMs are bad at, and they have addressed them. So with the 2023 facelift, Tesla updated the exterior of the Model 3, making it look a bit sleeker and more modern with its very slim headlights and the new design rear lights. I wouldn't go so far as to say that the exterior is completely transformed, and I've seen that people have mixed opinions about the new design. Some prefer the old one, but this design change certainly brings the Model 3 up to date, and I personally like it more. The facelift also improves the aerodynamics, with the coefficient of drag dropping from 0.223 to 0.219, and this is achieved mostly through the redesign of the front end, which is also a bit lower than it was before. And so this makes the hood more steeply raked. And I think this helps the design. It helps it look more wedge-shaped and sportier than before. Now, Tesla is renowned for its ingenious ways of cutting costs. Although this car is by no means dominated by the cost-cutting measures, they are visible, and one of them is the removal of the fog lights from the front bumper. The pre-facelift car had slim LED fog lights that were placed nice and low in the bumper so that they really helped you when it was foggy out. But now, in the interest of saving a few bucks, this car no longer has them. From the side, you won't really be able to tell that this is the facelift unless you have a very keen eye, but you will notice the new 18 and 19-inch wheels. The standard 18s are almost completely covered and they have an aero design, but you can opt for 19s, which are also new for the facelift, and they really transform the look of the vehicle, I think. And they don't really affect comfort that much, given how comfy this car is and how soft its suspension is. Surprisingly soft for a vehicle that looks this sporty. There's a surprising amount of lean through the corners. I frankly wasn't expecting this, but apparently the suspension has been changed from the pre-facelift model, and there's more of an emphasis on comfort. And this is also reflected in the choice of tires, which are Hankook Ion Evos that are designed to be really quiet. And they are. The revised rear end design not only brings new light clusters, but it also changes the design of the rear bumper, which is sportier than before. It has like a fake diffuser thing going on, and I really like it. It definitely makes the car look considerably sportier than the pre-facelift model, especially from the back. The interior is also much better than before. Tesla used to say about the pre-facelift car's interior that it was premium, but it wasn't really true, neither in terms of materials or assembly quality. However, with the Highland, that has definitely been addressed. The interior is remarkably well screwed together. There are no rattles or creaks or anything of the sort. This car is also helped by the fact that it's a sedan and not a hatchback in this regard, because the cargo area is isolated from the passenger compartment, and it's just a really nice place to spend time. The car has Alcantara on the door cards, and it feels very nice and plush, and there's a little bit of memory foam underneath it, so it feels just a bit soft when you touch it. This adds to the premium feel of the interior. Wherever you touch, the grab handles for the doors, they are also very soft and pleasant. The entire door card is soft all the way down. The armrest is really pleasant. You can just sink your elbow into it and it doesn't feel like you reach the plastic underneath, no matter how hard you push, and I like that. The seats have also been improved. They are even more comfortable than before, and they offer more lateral support, and they also look a bit sportier too. The car comes as standard with heated and cooled seats, as well as a heated steering wheel, and the bench seat in the back is also heated. I don't think I've seen cooled seats in a car of this size before. You adjust the steering column electrically. I mean, sure, there are no dedicated buttons, and the only dedicated controls in this car are for the front seats, which are also electric as standard. So to control stuff like the steering wheel or the mirrors, you have to go to a menu, and then you adjust it using the controls on the wheel. What I like most about it is that you can get a very pleasant driving position. You can bring the steering wheel really close to you, so that you don't feel like you're reaching for it. And for me, I can get a really good position with my legs a bit stretched so that it's comfortable for me on a long journey. What I would have liked is for the seat squab to be a bit longer so that it supported my thighs a bit better. But this is a minor complaint and I haven't really suffered as a result, but it's just something I noticed. 3 adults can sit in the back, although for a longer journey, you shouldn't really take more than 2 people in there. Plus headroom for 6-footers and over is a bit limited. The car gets a dual panoramic roof as standard with a strengthening beam here in the middle. This is a nice feature. It definitely helps the interior feel airy and more pleasant, but it also makes the interior very hot on very sunny days, and there's no way to cover it. Sure, the glass is treated, but if you touch it, it's kind of hot on hot days, and it transmits that heat into the cabin, and there's no escaping it. I'm sure you can find some cheap stick-on sunshades if you really want them, although they would ruin the beautiful minimalist look. But maybe if you take this on a long road trip through a very hot climate, maybe you might need them. In the rear, the floor is also completely flat. Unlike many vehicles, even ones built on a bespoke EV platform still have some remnant of a transmission tunnel, but this doesn't. One minus point is the fact that being an EV and a sedan, the battery eats up into foot space. And since the rear bench seat is placed quite low because this is quite a low car, passengers' knees will be pushed higher by the higher floor than in a comparable gas-powered sedan of this size. Tesla has changed the angle of the backrest for the rear bench, so it is more comfortable on a longer journey, but the fact that your knees are pushed up, as well as the fact that you can't really slide your feet underneath the front seats, these certainly detract comfort points for rear occupants. But at least they do have a really big armrest with 2 cup holders. They also get a new screen, which wasn't there in the pre-facelift car. And they can not only change the climate and even adjust the airflow through the touchscreen, which is pretty cool, but they can also watch Netflix and YouTube back there. So you don't need to hang additional screens. You can just play stuff on the central screen. It is a bit low for comfy watching, but it does the job. Interior practicality is superb in the Model 3. I think it has one of the best designed and most practical interiors that I've ever seen in a car. Plus there are premium touches that you don't even get in much more expensive vehicles. So all of the 4 door pockets, not only are they, well, they're fairly big, you can even fit a bottle in here, in the front ones at least, but they are also lined in felt, so your belongings don't rattle around, and all 4 of them are lit, which I don't remember seeing in even more expensive cars, so that's quite nice. The central cubbies are positively massive. The one right underneath the screen is really big, and there's a 12-volt connector in there, so you can charge old-fashioned stuff. And the lid action is very premium. It's like in a 7 Series. It's really luxurious feeling. It's nicely damped, and you just press it and it returns. The same damped lid covers the cup holders. When you lift the armrest, you get another huge cubby in here. This one is also quite massive, bigger than in most other cars. And another thing about these 2 compartments that I just mentioned, they are also lit and very helpful at night. The facelifted Model 3 also has a screen with smaller bezels. It's the same size as before, but there's more usable screen space, and it works just as well as before. It's probably the best touchscreen I've ever tested in a car. And the infotainment software itself is also really good. Sure, we can moan however much we want about the disappearance of physical controls in cars, especially for regularly used functions like climate, but if they're as good as in this Tesla, it frankly isn't that bothersome. If you want, for instance, to adjust the temperature, you do have to take your eyes off the road and look for the temperature thing here. And when you tap on your climate zone, it brings up the heated and cooled seat options, as well as the heated steering wheel, and they are very easy to adjust. And the screen's responsiveness is second to none. There are certainly other manufacturers with good infotainment systems, but I think Tesla's is by far the best I've ever tried. There's a lot to play with in the infotainment. So you tap on the little car icon in the corner, and the menus are controls, pedals and steering, charging, autopilot, locks, lights, display, trips, navigation, safety, service, software, Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. And they are all very logically laid out. So in the pedals and steering menu, you can choose between chill and standard acceleration. If you put it in chill, the accelerator's response is dulled considerably, but you get more range, and the car is more efficient. This car is an efficiency king. It's better than any other car on the market. It's the most efficient EV on the market. which is why it manages to stretch the kilowatt hours in its battery pack for so long. You can also adjust the steering mode. You can put it in comfort, standard, or sport. If you switch between comfort and sport, you certainly notice a difference. Charging allows you to set a charging limit, and it also shows you your last charging session. Then you go to autopilot. So this is one of the few options that you can add to this vehicle, which is enhanced autopilot and then full self-driving. Although full self-driving isn't available, you can get the hardware installed in the vehicle, but you are not legally allowed to use it, and the car doesn't offer this feature in Europe. So this car has autopilot, which has an auto steer feature, so the car essentially drives itself, although you're still legally required to keep your hands on the steering wheel in Europe. But with this enabled, the car takes corners on its own. And if you've seen how good FSD, full self-driving, is in the US, where you can enroll in a beta program, now it's called supervised, then you know it's one of the best ADAS systems on the market. Now it's braking for some reason. Why are you braking? Oh, we entered a 30 km/h zone. But the BMW behind me obviously was not going to brake for it. So it adjusts to the speed limit, as you saw there. You can also play Netflix and YouTube on this screen. You need a Wi-Fi connection for that, but it's fairly straightforward. And video streaming is also available for the rear screen. The car also has Spotify, that even gets a dedicated button here, but I don't like Spotify because it exploits artists, so I've never used it. The car also has cameras all around that can capture an accident, or if somebody is trying to tamper with it while it's parked, you enable Sentry mode, and that keeps a look around the vehicle while you're away. And if someone keys your Tesla or sets off some fireworks next to it, you will know about it. The cameras also serve a dash cam function, so if something happens while you're driving the vehicle, it will record it, and you can show your insurer that you were not to blame. One of the things I don't agree with in this new Model 3 is the removal of any and all sensors. So this car relies on its cameras for everything, like for the semi-autonomous driving that other manufacturers use radar and LiDAR for. But Tesla has adopted what it calls the pure vision approach, another cost-cutting measure. I don't have a problem with how its ADAS systems work when you're driving normally on a road like this, for instance. The car will brake if a pedestrian jumps on the road in front of you, and it will brake automatically. And it will also do it if the car in front slams on its brakes suddenly. What I do have a problem with is using the cameras instead of parking sensors. It works reasonably well in most situations. I mean, it detects objects and it tells you you're approaching them and that you should stop before you hit them. That generally works okay. But it sometimes detects stuff that just isn't there. It gets frightened by road surface changes, or in a parking lot, if there are some markings on the road, it might even consider those to be obstacles, and it will tell you to stop even when you're just going over a white line or something. Let's see if it sees this barrier here. Getting quite close to it. Still nothing. So it's a green gate. I think I'm almost up to it, and it has not detected it. Let me show you how close I am to the gate, and the car has said nothing about it. So this is how close I am. I think it should have detected it. This is one of the drawbacks of the facelift Model 3, as is the fact that the stalks behind the steering wheel are gone. Tesla will tell you it's for minimalism's sake, but it's also for cost-cutting sake. So the indicators have been moved to the steering wheel, but they're not one button on one prong and one button on the other, one on the left and one on the right. They are stacked one on top of the other on the left prong, and it takes a bit of getting used to, but after a week with the car, I'm no longer reaching for a ghost stalk behind the steering wheel. So to put it into gear, you have to press on the brake, and then this bar appears on the left of the screen in left-hand drive cars and on the right in right-hand drive cars. And you swipe up for drive and you swipe down for reverse, and this brings up the cameras and everything else. If you don't like using these, there are also controls here on the headliner, and this is where the hazard button is located because it is a legal requirement to have it in physical form. Tesla has also implemented a feature where the car knows whether you want to go forward or back. It will assume you want to go forward if there's an obstacle close to the rear of the vehicle, and it will think you want to go into reverse if there's something very close in front of the vehicle. I actually don't mind it that much, the slidey thing. I like that it works really quickly, so you can just swipe up and down and move it from drive into reverse real quick. That I like. There's no lag. And this is helped by the excellent ergonomics. I mean, unlike in many vehicles, the screen in this is very close to you and you can easily reach out and touch it. You don't have to stretch like you do in some other cars. Space in the trunk is also really good. Sure, you don't get the benefits of a practical hatchback, so you can fit larger items, but even in this sedan form factor, you still have plenty of usable space and the opening is big enough, and you can fill it with almost 600 liters of your stuff. And if that's not enough, this car also has a frunk, or a front trunk, or a front boot, which adds another 88 liters of capacity. So on the practicality front, this car is unmatched. I also like the design of the steering wheel. It's nice and sporty feeling. It has a flat bottom and it feels great in the hand. I really like it. And just the steering wheel alone lends this car quite a sporty character. And not only do you get a nice and fairly low driving position in this car, but even with the seat in its lowest position, you still get a really good view out, helped by the fact that there's not an instrument binnacle in front of you here. So the dash is really low, the nose itself is really low, and you get an amazing view of the road. Much better than in any other vehicle I've ever driven, especially another sedan. It helps with maneuvering in tight spaces, which is good because this car doesn't have parking sensors. And when you're driving the car briskly, it helps you place it through the turns. In some ways it feels like a sporty mid-engine car with a very short nose. This sports car feel is helped by the steering itself, which is very quick and sharp. There's not that much feel, but it's one of the best steering setups that I've tried in a modern car, to be honest. It's really well judged, and it just makes this car feel agile and darty and fun to drive. This is one of the most enjoyable electric vehicles I've ever driven. I've not had the privilege to drive a Taycan yet. Maybe that'll change someday. But I have driven the BMW i4 M50, and while that is quicker in a straight line than this, although not by much, it feels heavy and cumbersome through the corners, and you feel like you're fighting the vehicle. I mean, it weighs way over 2 tons, 2.3, 2.4 tons. And this, even with the bigger battery pack and the dual motors, it weighs just over 1,800 kilograms. But what happens when you show it a few bends? I've reached this twisty road now and we can test it. I can already tell you the suspension feels quite floaty and there is plenty of roll through the corners. It doesn't feel that sporty in this regard. I think the pre-facelift Model 3 had a bit stiffer suspension setup. Apparently the suspension for the revised Model 3 was engineered in China, and I assume they prefer a softer suspension setup that is geared more towards comfort. And this is certainly a really comfortable car and very refined. By the way, the facelift adds dual glazing all around on all 4 side windows. And between this and the super quiet tires, I think this is the quietest EV I've ever been in. And it is helped by being so slippery, and you don't hear the wind rushing around any of the elements. It just cuts through the air. It's really quite pleasant and relaxing to drive. So my tester is the dual motor. It has a 78-ish kilowatt-hour battery pack with a usable capacity of around 75 kilowatt-hours, and it has a WLTP range of 678 kilometers with the 19-inch wheels, or 628 with these larger 19s. So depending on what your priorities are, better looks or better range, you know which wheels to choose. The dual motor long range starts from just under 49,000 euros in Romania, and there's a cheaper single motor rear wheel drive variant with a smaller battery that costs just under 41,000 euros, and it has a WLTP range of 513 kilometers. That can accelerate to 100 kilometers per hour in 6.1 seconds, which is very brisk, especially for a base model. The base model has a battery pack with a different battery chemistry that is supposedly better at taking regular fast charges and being fast charged to 100%, and it suffers less degradation. It's more than adequate for anybody, to be honest. If you move up to the dual motor, like the car that I'm driving today, the combined power of the 2 motors is around 400 horsepower. I've seen conflicting reports about how much power this makes because Tesla itself doesn't state it. But I think it makes 393 horsepower and maybe 450 Newton meters of torque between its 2 motors. And it has a claimed 0 to 100 kilometers per hour time of 4.4 seconds. The top speed has dropped compared to the pre-facelift model, the dual motor long range like this, from 235 kilometers per hour to 200 kilometers per hour, or from 145 miles per hour to 125 miles per hour. No electric car review would be complete without discussing charging. The Model 3 isn't the quickest charging EV on the market, but with a maximum charging power of 250 kilowatts for the long range and the performance variants, it's up there with the best, especially given it's not one of those fancy 800-volt EVs. The base rear-wheel drive car with the LFP pack charges at a maximum 170 kilowatts, which is still pretty good. During my time with the Model 3, I had the chance to use a Tesla supercharger for the first time, and it was the easiest and most fuss-free charging experience ever. The car had a paid subscription, and all you had to do was find a free supercharger stall, park the car there, and then just plug it in. Charging started automatically, and while it never came close to the 250 kilowatt maximum, during one of the charging sessions I did see a peak of 155 kilowatts, and that was without preconditioning the battery. This too is done automatically when you select the supercharger as your destination via the car's navigation, and it preconditions the battery to the ideal temperature for charging on the way there. The regenerative braking seems pretty smart too, and it's one of the easiest to get used to in any EV. It feels like it's constantly adjusting the level of regeneration depending on how and where you're driving, as well as what's in front of the vehicle. Driving it through town in stop-and-go traffic, I found myself almost never using the friction brake, since the car always seemed to stop in the spot I would have stopped in myself anyway. I've experienced adaptive brake regeneration in other EVs, but I think that in the Tesla it works better than in any other car that I've tried. Let's see how it accelerates. So you don't have to brake boost it or anything, you just stop and then you gun it. 100. And it keeps surging all the way to its top speed. Having just gone over the speed limit now, it's worth noting that all new cars have a speed limit alert thing that you usually have to go through a menu to turn off, but in the Model 3 you just tap on the speed limit here and it mutes the alert. That's the most elegant way of shutting it up that I've found in any new car. I really like the power delivery in this car. It just pushes you into your seat. This is definitely a 400-ish horsepower car, no question about it. And nobody needs this much performance in a daily. But it is fun when it pins you to your seat. It's a really great car. And for me, as a driving enthusiast, I definitely like the dual motor with its extra shove. Now it's not delivering quite as much power as it should be because the battery is at 55% state of charge, which gives me a range of 269 kilometers, which is pretty good. So even though this car has a WLTP range of over 600 kilometers, it's very hard to achieve it, although you are certainly able to exceed 500 kilometers without too much effort. You just drive it normally. This car is, as I said, remarkably efficient, better than any other car on the market, at least a car of this size, and even smaller ones. If you want even more power, you can get the performance version, which gets plenty of upgrades that are enticing to an enthusiast like me. Stiffer suspension, bigger brakes, different wheels and tires. The tires on this aren't the sportiest feeling, to be honest, and maybe that has more steering feel and it gives you more confidence to push, because this just feels like it's going to understeer a bit at the limit with this tire setup, with the standard Hankook tires. The performance also gets more aggressive front and rear bumpers, a rear ducktail spoiler, sportier, grippier seats, and of course more power. In Europe it makes 460 horsepower, but in the US it makes over 500. And the US version can sprint to 100 kilometers per hour from a standstill, well, 60 miles per hour, in under 3 seconds, while the one we get in Europe, which is made in China, just like my tester, has a peak output of 460 horsepower and it is quoted to 100 kilometers per hour in over 3 seconds. But the difference is negligible. I'm sure they feel almost identical and plenty fast. And the performance also has a higher top speed of 262 kilometers per hour. It has the same battery as this, so the long-range battery, but its claimed range drops to 528 kilometers, which is just a bit more than the standard range rear-wheel drive model. and the performance costs from 55,990 euros before you add on some options. And speaking of options, one of the coolest things about the Model 3 and Teslas in general is that you get all of the equipment as standard. So the heated and cooled electric seats, the powered steering column adjustment, the big screen, the panoramic roof, which extends all the way back. Unlike in any other car, it's really nice. You get a 17-speaker sound system, which is tremendous. It is both clear and bassy, and it's nice. It's definitely a good sound system. You also get mood lighting in the new Model 3, which gets a wraparound strip of LEDs that you can change the color of to whatever you desire. It also extends onto the rear doors, so the rear passengers aren't forgotten in this car. The rear seats are also heated as standard. That's impressive. The only things that Tesla wants more money for are the bigger wheels, different paint jobs. This is rocking the stealth gray look, which is a 2,000 euro option. So this and the red are 2,000 euros, and the other three colors are 1,200 euros. And the only standard paint that you don't have to pay extra for is white. But to be fair, the Model 3 looks great in white, so why pay extra? You can also pay extra for the Autopilot, enhanced Autopilot, and full self-driving tech. You can also specify a tow hook, I think, but that's pretty much it. This car has full LED lights that have the ability to perform matrix LED-like functions. I mean, it has an automatic high beam assist, if I'm not mistaken. Let me check. Lights, accent lights, dome lights, yada yada da. Where is it? Adaptive high beams. Selectively dims individual pixels of the high beams to reduce glare for other traffic. So yeah, it does have it. The Model 3 is really hard to beat. It is not only a good electric car, but it is a good car full stop. It is practical, comfortable, decently sporty. It looks good. It has unmatched range and efficiency among its electric peers. It's just a brilliant car, and it's no accident that it's as popular as it is. I really love it. And I kind of want one, but maybe I'll reserve judgment until I drive the performance. Until then, thank you for watching.